Well, I was planning on eating 3.4 grams of dried B plus mushrooms in my apartment for the first time alone. I have tripped with friends before, I think 3 times, but each time a feeling grew stronger that I wasn't doing them correctly. The setting. I was in my living room with low volume surround sound and Dave Matthews playing through it. I remember Dave Matthews' band made me feel amazing as hell while on a previous LSD trip a long while before this. The time of ingestion was 10 a.m. I began to eat my mushrooms and can only finish 3 grams of them. I waited for about a half an hour and just started to feel them when I started to hear a slight beeping sound. So I was walking around my whole apartment for about 5 minutes looking for the source of this noise, and it finally led to my front door of my apartment. I opened it up, looked to the left, and the top half of the hallway was filled with black smoke. I looked to the right and it was the same thing. It was the most surreal image I have ever seen. I just stood there for about 10 seconds looking, and then I coughed and closed the door. I then started problem solving aloud. I said, "Okay, is my apartment complex on fire?" About 3-second pause of thoughts. "No way, I'm just tripping." 3-second pause for thinking. "Hell no, I just ate those, and what the fuck unless these are crazy potent or something. My apartment is on fire." Another 3-second pause. "What the hell? I really have to deal with this?" One more pause. "Well fuck. Let's get out of this building." So I ran out of the sliding glass back door. I was on ground level. And ran up to a neighbor already out there and said, "Dude, the apartment is on fire." He just gawked at me like I was a complete dumbass, which gave me a whole bunch of bad vibes. So I ran back inside and yelled, "Wait, what the fuck? I need my keys." Which was weird. I was not even thinking that or aware that was in my mind at the time. So for 10 minutes I was looking for my keys, sprinting everywhere in my apartment. Within that time, 2 fire trucks pulled up into a parking lot and multiple cops as well. I then hear loud footsteps and then a key jingle and then a door slam open. My thoughts were, what the fuck is that? It happened in a few seconds but a little louder. I was still in utter confusion. It happened again, but sounds like it was right next door, and realized it was most likely emergency personnel or something. I hear them walking to my door and hear the key rapidly poking against my front door lock and jingle of their keys. At that moment, I immediately knew where my keys were. I threw them on top of a speaker the night before when my friends were in town visiting, and I got back from a drunk Taco Bell run. They slid and fell behind it. So I jumped over to it and grabbed them while the firemen came in running at me with their big goony looking heat suits pushing me out the back door. I looked around and everyone was looking at me with a what the fuck kind of face. I thought, screw them, I just did something amazing, I think, and slowly walked to my car in the parking lot. Let's say 10:45 now. I'm sitting in the hood of my car, pretzel-legged, watching huge bellows of black smoke pour from the apartment complex. In my mind, I already believe that I don't live here anymore. I watched the smoke for about 30 minutes or so, and then I thought, wow, how many people get to watch this every day? And at that moment, I felt a huge weight lift off of me, and I felt as light as a feather and as graceful as a swan, which really caught my attention and plastered a huge goofy smile across my face that looked happy and astonished. I then looked around super slowly from left to right, observing all the people around me with that goofy face stuck there. Everyone was crying, screaming, moaning, all on their phones frantic. I then thought, I'm the happiest motherfucker here, and I started to let out a giggle, but immediately caught myself and realized I couldn't express myself here. My face probably looked funny, because it took a 180-degree change from happy to oh shit, so I slithered into the passenger seat of my car, laid the seat back, and began to watch the clouds, and think about why that was so uplifting. It's about 11:20 now. The first clouds that I see is a huge oval cutout of a blue sky through a massive cloud that covered the span of my vision. In the blue oval was a huge natural mushroom-shaped cloud. No explosion obviously, just an awesome spectacle of nature. And a huge wave of pure excitement flooded me, and I bust out laughing in my car, which I quickly seized as I remember what was happening around me. I then drove to my nearby parents' house and told them what was up, so they let me chill there until the experience was done. Looking back now, I can say there's no way I would have been able to move on in such an instant if I was not tripping on mushrooms. I never said once, "Oh, I lost 2 years of work on my drawings and art supplies, or everything I own is gone." Looks like mushrooms can ease a traumatic experience. My long-term boyfriend and I had planned to take mushrooms one Saturday afternoon, and having done it a few times already and having amazing experiences. After taking some fresh mushrooms and not feeling too affected, we had more. We drank spirits and smoked cigarettes, which we normally don't do. After a few hours, I felt affected. Objects in my peripherals swirled and shook, and colors changed. Everything seemed to expand and then contract as if breathing. We cranked up music and laughed and chatted. Suddenly, my boyfriend pulls out a bag of LSA tabs. He was planning to take them with a couple of his friends on a long weekend, but we were having a great trip and just wanted more, and more, so we each took one. Not knowing we needed to wait at least 4 hours to take more, we shared another an hour or so later. Mind you, perception of time is warped on these sort of drugs. Unbeknownst to me, he took the rest of the tabs at some point that afternoon, having 4.5 tabs to himself. He had never done it before. While we were waiting for the LSA to work, we ate some old dried mushrooms. It was as if nothing really mattered and we were capable of tolerating any amount of drugs. We called a friend to get a bag of marijuana and called other friends to come over. We were having a great time. So we're laying on his bed, staring out his window at a beautiful sunset. The tree's branches on the horizon were warping, twisting, and swaying. By the time our friend and his girlfriend came over with the weed, my boyfriend was acting a bit out of it. He wasn't making sense to our friends and could barely talk properly. I was okay, but struggling to find words. I felt very uncomfortable being in the state I was in front of people who were straight. We chopped up a session and smoked it. My boyfriend had a massive cone. He laid on the bed and was unable to interact with us. He was in his own world. Other friends came over and my boyfriend couldn't say more than 3 words to them. He kept repeating the same lines over and over again, like, "I feel sick," and kept asking where I was. He needed to go to the toilet, but refused to get up. He eventually pissed himself. He wouldn't get up to change, and he was too heavy for me to pull up. All our friends left at that point. It was too much for them to be around. I sat and tried to snap him out of it for a while. I took his pants off and tried to get him up to change pants. He got really angry and confused about what was happening. For the next part of the story, you must know that my boyfriend is an incredibly passive person and has never hurt me in the 4 years we've been together. This part is somewhat blurry in my mind. I remember I either yelled at him or cried, and he reacted so frighteningly violently. He repeatedly kicked me from the bed, pulled my hair really hard, and yelled at my face. He was clawing at my face and trying to kick me. I pulled away and looked at my hand. It had blood all over it. I wiped the blood off my face and sat and stared at him for a while. I told him to calm down and said I loved him and then kissed him. He licked me in a sadistic way and pulled my hair again. I pushed all my weight into him and put my arm against his neck to suffocate him slightly. I told him to stop and he said okay. I sat and stared at him for a while. Every so often he would look at me with a horrifically scary face. I didn't know what to do. All I could think of was to go upstairs to his 17-year-old sister's room. I went up there where she and her friends were sitting and talking. They were horrified at the cuts I had on my face and disinfected them and put ice on them. I was absolutely petrified to leave my boyfriend by himself. I didn't know if he would harm himself or break anything. When I left him, he was saying over and over, "No one even knows why. It doesn't make sense. And what is the point of all this?" As if he was having the revelation of his life. I sat with the girls for a while and got worried. I asked them to come downstairs with me. We did this twice. The first time I left him alone again. The second time we heard him having a shower, so I helped him get changed and asked the girls to sit with us in the living room. He and I were so cold that we were both shaking so much. We sat on the couch and put calm music on and he drew symbols on paper. He suddenly seemed to snap out of his trance and noticed I had ice on my face. He asked what happened and I eventually told him. He was distraught at what he had done. As he was calm and coherent, I felt safer, and the girls went back upstairs. He and I eventually decided to go up to the spare room to sleep, but couldn't sleep all night. We just lay there talking. He was obsessed with me keeping ice on my wound. I had the most horrible headache the next day and spent the whole day throwing up. He felt so awful about what happened. He said that he would never forgive himself. We had to make up an elaborate story for when people would ask about my face. Despite the day part of the trip being wonderful, the night part was the most horrifying experience of my life. To feel deeply frightened by someone you love and trust is one of the worst things that can happen. It's Monday night and I had to get today off of work. I still feel spaced out, and I don't think I'll ever feel totally normal again. I've tripped a few times before this with doses of about 2 to 4 grams, and I've had good trips all before, but tonight I was alone. Something I'd recommend strongly against is tripping alone. Well, tonight I had 7.5 grams of nice dried mushrooms. I started off by eating 3 or 4 grams of the stuff, which was all I had planned. But 3 hours later, I didn't feel anything at all. From experience and from what I've heard, it takes maybe 10 minutes to an hour to kick in. But 3 hours? So I ate the rest. A very stupid thing to do. About 15 minutes later, it kicked in. The world became colorful. Everything without detail became covered with purple O's with green in the middle. Things changed color and I remember seeing into my hand. This was from 11 p.m. to somewhere between 1 and 2 a.m. But soon I noticed that I wasn't moving and thinking logically. I would try to do something and it would come out all wrong. I suddenly started thinking, why did I do this? Or, this was so stupid. I tried moving around, but that didn't help. At this point, everything I saw went crazy. The infamous purple-green O's I always see, whenever I trip I see them, were everywhere, and weren't fading. Things were contorting and I was getting claustrophobic as hell. I decided I better make myself puke. I wasn't thinking straight, though, as the psilocybin was already in my system, but my gag reaction was 100% gone. I could literally stick my hand down my throat and feel nothing. So I decided to go to the hospital and get my stomach pumped. I live only a few blocks from the hospital, but I was going to take my car. I had just gotten my license. But I couldn't remember which side was the driver's side and which side was the passenger side, so I stumbled to the hospital. I couldn't have walked straight for $1 million. And they just decided to watch me over for an hour, after they explained that it was too late to pump my stomach. Now before this, I was just really freaked out, but when I sat in their chair, I became more scared than I've ever been in my life. The room was moving, the doctors talked to me, and I don't remember much of it. But I do remember thinking I felt retarded. I would try to do something and it just wouldn't work. That's an incredibly scary feeling to have. After the doctors left, I continued to be tortured by the room, and then in one quick sweep, a wave of pure darkness surrounded me, and a small, maybe 3 foot or so, a figure with a pure white body walked out. It was just like a person, on scale, but obviously smaller, but it had no details. I could only see the contour. As it walked out, I just realized that it was death, and at that moment I was positive I would die. It was the scariest moment of my life. As the effects of shrooms started to die down, they let me walk home. When I got back, I was still tripping, and even though not so harshly, it was not good. So I laid down for what seemed to be an eternity until I was able to go to sleep. The night was young and so was I, but I was not inexperienced. Before this trip, I must have done mushrooms over 15 times. It all started at my best friend Dan's apartment, where me, him, and our friend Adam were planning to have a fun night taking shrooms and hanging out. This ended up being so much more than that. We all started the night by taking around 2.5 to 3 grams of mushrooms each. Before they kicked in, we must have smoked 3 blunts and drank around 4 or 5 beers each. We all felt the mushrooms starting to kick in around the same time. It was just like any other time feeling them slowly creep into my body. I always know when it's coming when I start to stretch and yawn. I was very eager for this trip because together we bought around a quarter pound of these shrooms and were hoping they would be good. Lights quickly became more vibrant and sounds were distorted. Anything and everything was completely hilarious. There were periods of time where I would laugh uncontrollably for over 5 minutes. At one point, I remember how much I loved looking at the bathroom tiles while tripping, so I went into the bathroom for a couple minutes and enjoyed that. When I got out, Dan showed me a poster our friend gave to him. It was Kurt Cobain, and it was a 4 foot tall, 3 foot wide cloth poster. He was pictured wearing a leather coat and his hands crossed at the waist. The background was wavy blue lines, almost like an ocean. We put the poster on the wall, and as soon as I sat down, I could not believe my eyes. Since the fan was on the cloth poster, it was waving around against the wall. and Kurt Cobain literally came out of the picture right up in front of my face. It was the most incredible thing I've ever seen. I turned to my friends and asked, "Are you guys seeing this too, or am I just crazy?" They replied, "Yup." We couldn't look away from the poster for a good 20 minutes, during which time one of our friends called up saying he was at his college frat house with 8 friends, all of which also doing shrooms. Dan offered to drive, and even though I didn't really want to go, he talked me into it. Before hopping to the car, we smoked another blunt and took another 1 to 2 grams of mushrooms each. Dan had a hooked up car, and I thought he would drive slowly, but boy, I was wrong. During the drive, there was a tunnel, maybe a half a mile to a mile long. It was late at night with not many people on the road, so Dan thought it would be a good idea to push his car to the limit. Faster and faster he went, me in the front, Adam in the back. The visuals were so intense and we were going so fast that me and Adam couldn't help but to start to scream out of fear, which mixed with laughs from tripping so hard. At one point, I looked at the speedometer and saw we were going between 120 to 130 miles an hour, and I almost started to cry. After getting out of the tunnel, which felt like an eternity, we realized we were only a few minutes away from the party, and I was so relieved. We walked into a typical dirty frat house to see a group of 7 or 8 guys sitting in one room, looking around and giggling. We told them about the drive there and how intense it was. Since everyone was in one room, there wasn't many places to sit, so I sat on the floor against the bed. After talking for about 15 minutes, someone said something extremely funny, and we all burst out to an uncontrollable laughing fit, and then it happened. I passed out and drifted into a different world. I was really having a seizure, but I honestly thought I was just dead. I went to another dimension floating through the universe. At certain points I stopped floating and I would see shapes and colors dramatically spinning and dancing. It was the most incredible sight I have ever seen, besides Kurt Cobain floating out of a poster. It felt like I knew the meaning of living, kind of like I was touched by the hands of God. When I started to come to, for the first 20 to 30 seconds, the real world looked like a cartoon. Dan looked like Bart Simpson, and everything around me looked like it was drawn. When I could finally see, I looked around to see 10 people staring at me like I was crazy, and I immediately knew something just went horribly wrong. I asked, what the hell just happened? They then told me I had a seizure and was shaking on the ground. Before I could tell them what I saw when I was knocked out, one of the guys who owned the house was kicking us out because I completely ruined his trip. Being 3 to 4 years younger than everyone else, I felt ashamed and mad that I ruined the night. Once I got up, I could barely walk to the car without Dan and Adam helping me stay on my feet. When we got home, I passed out immediately and just wanted to forget the whole thing. One thing I didn't want to mention till now is that this was the second time I had a seizure on mushrooms, and it also happened one time after this. I wanted to tell this story instead of the others because 7 years later, I still remember it like it was yesterday, and the intensity was like nothing I have ever dealt with before. Good times.